The Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayers Associations, Jim Rodkey.
My name is Jim Rodkey, and I'm here today as a representative of the 79 taxpayers associations across the state of Pennsylvania, known as the PCTA. The Pennsylvania Coalition of Taxpayers Associations fully supports House Bill and Senate Bill 76. In fact, we look at this as the people's legislation because our groups, under the guidance of David Baldinger, played a role in its creation and have been overseers in the entire process. I want to thank the Senate and House Urban Affairs Committee for giving me a voice in this hearing as we look at the future of our cities, both large and small. You do have a longer written testimony on this issue that goes into more detail, and in an effort to save time, I'll provide you with a summary. The school property tax is often 2/3 of our property tax. Because of the higher cost of this property tax, it creates unique problems in our cities. And while sheriff sales happen in all demographics, they are far more commonplace in the city. This is because our cities are often places that attract younger families and the working poor, who are more apt to purchase a home within the city than they are in the more rural areas where the homes are far more expensive. The dramatic increases that we've seen in the school property tax is making this more difficult. Rather than encouraging home ownership, which creates a more stable community, the increases in the school property tax is making it harder for these people to afford to buy a home. For those who have purchased a home, it's making it harder for them to stay in that home or to make the necessary repairs and improvements. And all of this only adds to the blighted properties that we've been talking about, and they make our cities less attractive places to relocate to. The property tax is a major contributing factor in the mortgage foreclosures and in the abandoned houses in our cities. These empty houses create health and safety issues in our cities, which in turn translates into higher costs for public health and safety and for law enforcement. These empty homes become easy targets for break-ins to steal the copper piping inside the home. There is also the problem with squatting in the homes, and they become they attract young people to do things that they might otherwise not have done. Property sold as a result of a sheriff's sale. This is a serious problem in the city that I'm from, in Lebanon. They're bought by slumlords, by out-of-state landlords who further neglect these properties, and they're able to buy these homes at a fraction of the cost of that property on the tax sale. Then they fail to keep the necessary upkeeps to that property, which drives down property values in the city, and this contributes to making our cities less attractive places to live in. The higher cost of rent is a result of the property tax. And high taxes encourage a more transient population. That transient population actually increases the cost of education. We have schools where they have 30 children in the classroom at the beginning of the year and 30 children at the end of the year, but 15 of those children have changed, which creates unique problems in our education and adds to the cost. It also creates an environment of instability and uncertainty in our children, which creates a more stressful lifestyle, and that translates into disciplinary problems and sometimes into juvenile crime. If our cities really do want to see revitalization, we should be encouraging home ownership to create more stable communities where its citizens can grow roots and develop a pride in their community. The elimination of the school property tax would do this while making it easier as well for homegrown small business to expand or develop. By shifting to a state sales and personal income tax while assuring that each school district receives exactly the same funding that they're currently receiving, adjusted each year by inflationary measures, HB and SB 76 do this. According to the IFO report, the shift from the property tax to a sales and income tax can actually produce an economic benefit. And it isn't just our IFO report, there's a report out of Texas that confirms the same statistics. It creates an economic benefit for the state while freeing homeowners from a feudal system form of taxation, where the government is our Lord and we are its serf. Our Constitution provides for protections of the individual in our inherent right to property. It does so in Article 1 and Sections 1, 2, 3, 10, and 26. Obviously, it was very important to them. Apparently, they believed as we do, that no tax should have the power to leave you homeless. Those wise founders who framed our Constitution understood that the first function and rightful role of government is the protection of the inherent right of property. But we've come a long way from that. I believe, as John Locke said, that the reason men enter into society in the first place is for the mutual protection of their property. And I also believe that all good local, state, and federal governments keep this as their primary objectives. But because we have shifted from this with the expansion of the school property tax, we can see the steady decline in our cities as a result of its implementation. While we have waged a war on poverty, the rapid increase in property taxes have made it harder to obtain home ownership, more difficult to heat those homes once purchased, and this has drastically impacted our cities, turning once proud neighborhoods of homeowners into unkept apartments, empty and blighted properties, and dwindling property values. The rapid increase in education costs far exceeds inflation, making it even harder to meet the revenue needs in our county and municipal governments. In most counties, it now costs three times as much for the school tax as it does to run our entire municipal and county governments combined. A judge recently ruled that in order to keep the property tax both equitable and constitutional, it would require regular assessments, and we've heard about that. I don't know if cities can afford it, but the property tax owners can't. $10 million every 3 years added to the budget already. That's going to be paid for by the cities. The assessments, they bring these appeals, which again adds to the cost in our cities. And it contributes to declining revenue available, so property taxes have to increase even more. An appeal by a major company in a district can create a major revenue loss for that community that has to be made up by the remaining property owners. In my hometown of Lebanon, which is a much smaller city, but still 33% of that property is now used for nonprofit. This isn't uncommon. In Harrisburg, it's 49% of all property. None of these properties are creating a tax revenue. We also have Keystone Opportunity Zones. Cabela's is a great example. I can show you 100 more that are bad. We invest in these properties. They take up 10% of the property and the land, and when the KOZ expires, so does the business. And the only investment that we as a homeowner get is higher taxes, because we're investing in a future that leaves as soon as the tax exemption leaves. Our schools and our local government tell us that one of the major problems that they face is the issue of unfunded mandates from the state government and its myriad of agencies. But let's be clear, an unfunded mandate is not an unfunded mandate. It's a property tax funded mandate. And this contradicts Article 3, Section 31 of the Constitution in interfering with the levying of taxes through a municipal body. If we shifted to a state sales and income tax for education funding, which, again, as our state constitution, Article 3, Sections 14 and 30 says that it belongs, it frees up revenue in our cities, it makes home ownership more attainable, and it makes it easier to make necessary home repairs, creating a more permanent and stable community environment. We have reached a point where the cost to our cities in maintaining the property tax is no longer sustainable. I would suggest that the need for the Commonwealth in bailing out the city of Philadelphia to the tune of $100 million not only demonstrates that the property tax is no longer a viable formula for school funding, it is a grim picture of what is going to happen to city after city in the Commonwealth. We need to do all that we can to keep our schools open. We need to do all that we can to make sure that we are providing a thorough and efficient system of education for our public schools. But when these costs violates the basic tenet of good government in denying us the protection of our property and only adding to the expense of maintaining our cities, it's time to look at serious alternatives for education funding. And as the mayor of York recently said, anything short of this is simply rearranging the chairs on the Titanic. Our Declaration of Independence states that just governments derive their powers from the consent of the governed. So the support for these bills has crossed party lines, ethnicities, and all manner of diversity because, frankly, when it comes to the school property tax, we the people no longer consent. If something isn't done legislatively, this is going to become a matter for the courts. And in my travels discussing the property tax issue, I can tell you that this is very seriously being considered as more and more of our residents feel this threat to their property becoming a reality. I encourage the members of this committee to look at this legislation, to review the IFO report, and consider the importance of restoring home ownership, which encourages business growth and creates a path for prosperity rather than putting more financial strain on our cities, as they're going to be forced to deal with more vacant properties as a result of people being taxed out of property ownership. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jim. I have a niece who is helping me. She's a newly minted MD, now going through her residency in Philadelphia, and she's helping me to understand some of my my father's medical issues, which at 77, he'll be 78 next week, are starting to get a little interesting. And finally she said, "Uncle Dave, in the human body, everything is related to everything. You know, the heart, the lungs, the kidneys." And I really appreciated your testimony because I think it helps us to bring together several issues that perhaps normally we consider in separate silos. We've got the needs of revitalizing older communities here. We've got tax reform over here, when in reality they are very much linked. I certainly concur that the way that we fund our school districts today, if challenged in court, I cannot imagine that the state Supreme Court would find it constitutional. And so the legislature is, as you know, very much active in attempting to find another way to fund the public schools, a fairer way to fund the public schools. If we don't do that, we have seen the experience in other states that some judge somewhere will say, okay, that idea goes in the trash can. Here's the way I want you to do it. And we're trying to avoid that, but we understand that, yeah, the current system has just not met the test of time. Questions from any of my colleagues, please, at this point. Representative Hill.
Just want to say thank you for your testimony, because no matter what town hall meeting I have or any town halls, the number one issue that always comes up is please eliminate my school property taxes. So it's out there, we hear you, and hopefully we'll continue to look at it in the state legislature and do something about it. So I appreciate what you had to say today.
I'm also going to, Representative Saccone, I'm also going to share with you the executive summary of my doctoral dissertation on the KOZs. I won't make you read the whole 400-page unless you really want to, but the final analysis was, as you'd indicated, some of them worked out very well. Some of them were complete failures. We had some communities that attempted to put a KOZ tax-free zone at the bottom of an abandoned strip mine. If there's no infrastructure, if there's no way to get in and out, if there's no local workforce, tax-free for 12 years doesn't matter. Cabela's, technically speaking, wasn't a KOZ, but it was something very, very close. And so, as Senator Schwenk had mentioned, that was only possible through the assistance of the local governments and the county governments working with the state. And I'm old enough to remember when I first started meeting with Hamburg people on doing something there with the infrastructure. They thought maybe someday they'd get a McDonald's. They had no idea the possible impact of what could have occurred and did occur. Representative Saccone.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, a couple of things. I thank you for your testimony. And I'm from the other side of the state, and it's the #1 issue in my district. And although I know it is over here in Berks County too, so I know people are rabid about property tax. So this does span the state, and we've got to do something about it. And I think we brought up in here today with some of the other testimony that it's not a stable way to fund anything, really. We're seeing with the appeals, property values going down, municipalities, school districts losing money that they were counting on before. It's not a good idea. And I find that I talk to young people because we think, oh, this will only help the senior citizens, which of course we want it to help. I talk to young people all the time who are trying to buy homes, get started, and they say, you know what, it's the property tax that's killing me, preventing me from getting the home I want. And the funny thing about it all is we say, you know, we don't fund education, we don't fund education. Really, it's really not going to fund education. 70% of that money, just like it is in the municipalities, is going to fund salaries, benefits, and pensions with automatic increases every year without regard to whether someone is a good employee or mediocre employee or a bad employee. And it's all borne on the backs of the taxpayer, which are far less capable, and these salaries, benefits, and pensions far outpace what the people that are paying the bill have available to them. So we've got to do something about this, and it all is all interconnected to our city. So thank you very much for coming.
Senator Schwenk.
Jim, thank you for your testimony. Excellent. This is good information to keep in our hands as we continue to work on this in the state legislature. I know one of the things that we've talked a lot about was the inequity in the allocation from the state of dollars for education. What is, you know, I know you're part of a grassroots effort, as you very eloquently say. This is the people's legislation. Yes. This isn't something that big lobbyists are funding. This is something that the exact opposite, correct. And that's so important, and I think makes your voice even stronger. But what are you doing to help address that issue for those communities like the northern tier where the funding formula works very well for them? Thank you. What's the answer there?
There is an inequity in the funding system that's in there, but that's a different issue. It's not a property tax issue, and this bill is only to address the issue of the property tax. The inequity issue, I believe, has to be addressed. You have some cities that are receiving state funding at 15% of their education, and other cities that are 80 to 90% of the funding. That has to be dealt with, but that has to be dealt with through a different form of legislation, and this is looking at how do we replace the current education funding that each municipality is receiving. And one of the things that I appreciate about the bill is that it has left this local referendum for things like building projects.
Right.
Because I don't believe that should be the responsibility of the state. If we want, if we want to compete with Pittsburgh, the Steelers for our school stadiums, then that should be our choice. But if we would prefer just some bleachers by the side, it should be our choice. Another part of that is that it has to be by a referendum, which is real local control, because it's the citizens who are making that decision. So it's another aspect. And there's another part of this that I'd like to mention. We talk a lot about creating programs to solve the problems that are going to use taxpayer revenue to do it. This is a program that doesn't use taxpayer revenue to solve some of these problems. This is going to immediately put $10 billion back into the economy of the state of Pennsylvania that's going to allow small business to invest their own money rather than tax-generated revenue money through a program, their own money back into their own small businesses to help those businesses grow.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much.